Welcome to the largest moving object in the world, the RMS Titanic. This is your captain, E.J. Smith. Before we begin this voyage, we would like to thank Park National Bank for presenting our entire Broadway series. Please pay homage to Park National Bank. Please review your program for additional sponsors and season partners and patronize these exceptional businesses whenever possible. Here are a few upcoming events outside in the Wren backlot. Jack and the Beanstalk on June 6th, a teddy bear concert. Mamma Mia in concert on June 26th. The Artistic Jazz Orchestra on July 10th, and Jurassic Park, the movie, on July 17th. Back inside, on the main stage, is the summer musical, Hairspray, July 31st through August 8th. For more information on memberships, sponsorships, volunteering, and events, please visit our website at wrentickets.org. We ask that for the safety of all passengers aboard, please keep your masks on during the duration of the voyage. You may remove your mask when eating or drinking. Now, put on your life vest securely and brace yourselves for Titanic the Musical, directed by Michael Thomas, with musical direction by Kelly Knowlton.
which mankind attempts to fabricate great works at once magnificent and impossible. On desert sands, from mountains of stones, the pyramid, from flying buttresses alone, a wall of light, a chapel ceiling screaming one man's ecstasy, one man's ecstasy. Miracles them all, China's endless wall, Stonehenge, the Parthenon, the Duomo, the aqueducts of Rome. We did not attempt to make with mammoth blocks of stone a giant pyramid. No, not a pyramid, nor Gothic walls that radiate with light. Our task was to dream upon and then create a floating city. Floating city. A human metropolis, a complete civilization, sleek and fast as once a poem, and the perfection of physical engineering as once a poem, and the perfection of physical engineering.
How did they build Titanic? Near 1,000 feet in length, huge beyond past endeavor, strong beyond mortal strength. 46,000 tons of steel, 11 stories high. She's a great palace floating, quiet as a lullaby. Fare thee well, my darling, I'll be back before a fortnight has passed.
Fare thee well, my darling, I'll be back before a fortnight has passed.
Fare thee well, my darling, I'll be back before a fortnight has passed. Barrett, Stalker, off the Baltic.
Fleet, look out off the Majestic.
Harold Bride, wireless operator with the Marconi Telegraph Company, Limited.
There she is, towering high, broad and grand, ship of dreams, sailing day, morning bright, take your flight, ship of dreams. She strains at her lines, the smoke from her funnels trailing, her brow like a knife, she'll cut through the waves unfailing. Soon to be underway, size and speed unexplored, and I'll be aboard that ship of dreams.
7,000 heads of fresh lettuce, Titanic.
Morning, Mr. Lightoller.
Morning, Mr. Pittman.
Morning, Mr. Boxhall. Morning, Captain Smith.
Morning, Captain.
Morning, Captain.
36,000 oranges, Titanic.
Morning, Mr. Hitchens.
Morning, Miss Pittman.
Morning, Mr. Murdoch.
Morning, Captain Smith.
Morning, Murdoch. Morning, Captain. Mr. Pittman, please complete the loading of the freight and prepare for the boarding of the serving staff and crew.
Aye, Captain.
tons of potatoes, 11,000 pounds of marmalade, 37,000 pounds of bottles, wine, beer, and spirits. Titanic.
55,000 china dishes and 20,000 crystal drinking glasses. Titanic.
One Renault town carriage motor car. Titanic.
Hello, Mr. Victory. Morning, Mr. Oliver. Hello, Mr. Hartley. Morning, Mr. Duncan. Cheers, Mr. Wakeman.
Further out from the mine you couldn't be. But born to the coal, there's no place for you elsewhere. You trade a life of dank and gloom to shovel in the boiler room, and now you're 7 decks below a lady's dainty feet. Nothing has changed, there's nothing a miner can do. The pitch and your mates turned into the hold and the crew. The screws are turning at 72. Faster and faster we watch as we gain ever more. 73 and too soon, it's 74. For a record speed I believe we strive. For the maiden trip that's too hard to drive. If you push her faster than 75, that is the truth, I swear.
Right in there. What a sight. The first-class dining saloon.
Come on, Alice. They want us to get the hell to our own saloon.
Language, Edgar? Did you get a good look at John Jacob Astor? He looks exactly like his picture.
So do you, Alice.
Oh, Edgar, this is so exciting. To think almost every millionaire in the whole world is on this ship. And we're going to be rubbing elbows with them. How impressed they'll all be when they hear all that you know about hardware.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't exactly count on rubbing elbows with them, Alice. They won't allow us peasants in second class to go anywhere near those people in there.
What's the same point of being on the same boat if we can't rub elbows with them? It's bad enough we have to make do with that dinky cabin they gave us and those 2 silly little bunk beds.
You know, we don't have to use the top one, Alice.
Calm down, Edgar. I'm going in there. If it's the last thing I do, I'm going in there.
Damn it, Alice.
Language, Edgar.
They don't want us in there. They want us right here where we are. That's all we paid for, and that's all we get.
Well, that's not all I'm getting. Oh!
Charles, look there, through the glass. There's first class for all your posh, smart people.
Rich people, you mean?
Of course they're rich, darling. They're Americans. Can't you just imagine what they'll all be jabbering about? All those things my father lives for. International banking, venture capital, cornering the market. You know, that sort of thing.
How would I know that sort of thing, Caroline? My father never had a corner on the market. All he ever had was a market on the corner. I warned you running away with me would be educational. Caroline, aren't you thrilled? Finally now, you'll see what second class looks like.
Oh, I love it when you're sarcastic, Charles. It makes me feel like we're a real married couple.
Well, why not? That's what we would be if your snob of a father had permitted it. And that is exactly what we will be the minute we arrive in America.
Well, considering our living arrangements, everybody aboard thinks we're already married.
You know perfectly well we would have separate cabins if I could have afforded them.
But separate cabins would mean separate beds, Charles.
Yes, well, we had to make do with what we had, didn't we? You don't suppose we'll burn in hell for it, do you?
Oh, stop worrying, darling. In America, it isn't a sin at all.
What isn't?
Saving money.
The dinner sitting for Thursday, April 11th, is now being served in the first-class dining saloon.
My dear Mr. Latimer, prepared to greet our clientele. Our meeting is imminent. Our having just rung the dinner bell, it won't be a novelty. We mostly have seen them all before. Prepare for the usual. You should be aware of what's in store. We've served them on the Baltic and the Oceanic, Olympic and Majestic, and today's the same. There's nothing changed. Mr. Astor takes his toast dry. Mrs. Strauss likes the grouse with the sauce on the side. And the Wideners love kidney pie. Bring it hot. If it's not, they'll be fit to be tied. They're accustomed to the best of all that money buys. The world of free enterprise has given this privilege to the rich. When they're idle, they're entitled to the luxury which we provide. That's forever the source of our pride, which is why we're always there with our special form of care for every hungry millionaire. By now they're all arrived.
We're sailing aboard the greatest ship that ever sailed the seas, the hull and the keel imperviously stronger by degrees.
Magnificent crystal chandeliers, parquets and bowls with gold.
The ceiling is Jacobean, our decor the world adores.
Remarkable sail,
remarkable sail, remarkable sail. If it would be put in a phrase, it's what a remarkable age this is.
EJ! You haven't told us how many miles we covered yesterday.
484, Mr. Ismay.
Oh, really? And you're satisfied with that?
Yes, I am, sir. It's better than I expected for the first day.
Yes, well, I'm sure you'll do better tomorrow.
Begging your pardon, Captain, Mr. Hitchens has requested his course.
Yes, Mr. Murdoch. Increase speed to 21 knots. And tell Mr. Hitchens to set course for west-northwest 292 degrees.
That is the northern track, sir.
I'm well aware of that, Mr. Murdoch. It will save us both coal and time. At least 3 hours.
3 hours? Well done, EJ.
A fellow's invented see-through film, he calls it cellophane. Another has built a parachute for jumping out of an airplane. Remarkable things for endless day from out the human brain. Indeed, and what a remarkable age this is.
The dinner sitting for Friday, April 12th, is now being served in the first-class dining saloon.
EJ, we are all anxious to hear yesterday's mileage.
519, Mr. Ismay.
Oh, much better.
I'm sorry to disturb your meal, Captain.
Who the devil are you?
Second wireless operator Bride, sir, with the Marconi International Marine Radio Telegraphy and Signal Communication.
What is it, Mr. Bride?
A message, sir. From the furnace line of Rappahannock, 4 days out of Halifax. She reports an iceberg.
Thank you, Mr. Bride. I can read.
The captain's table pristine. Here we seat the elite whom we happily serve. Here they dine on fine French cuisine. It's the creme de la creme's exclusive preserve. It's the pleasure of the leisure class's greatest wits to be where the captain sits when taking their dinner on the sea. Giving deference to their preferences is our chief art. We play a part in a perfectly working machine. You should ever be aware this is a privilege, great and rare, a special burden that we bear in our respective lives.
The dinner sitting for Saturday, April the 13th, is now being served in the first-class dining saloon.
Mrs. Astor, I understand this was your first trip to Europe. How did you find Paris?
Oh, well, thank goodness I didn't have to. John knew exactly where it was.
Excuse me, Captain.
Yes, Mr. Lightoller.
Have you any instructions, sir, concerning our present speed?
Maintain 21 knots, Mr. Lightoller.
21 knots, yes, sir.
21 knots? We want to get into New York by Tuesday afternoon. At that rate, we'll never get there.
I'm afraid it's too soon for either of us to say, Mr. Ismay. I trust you'll forgive me. Please continue with your meals.
Oh, must you leave us, Captain?
Unfortunately, Mrs. Astor, my duties on the bridge, though not so pleasant as sitting here with you attractive ladies, require my attention. Please forgive me.
Remarkable U.S. Steel is splitting shares at 5-4.
Monopoly makes the industry far better than before.
Attending the coronation of King George V was grand.
And afterwards up to Monaco to frolic in the sand.
Remarkable talk, remarkable times, remarkable world. So much to surprise and amaze. And what a remarkable time, what a remarkable world, what a remarkable world.
Sweets and after-dinner liqueurs are now being served in the Café Parisien.
What's our position, Mr. Murdoch?
Latitude 4235 north, longitude 4550 west, Captain.
And the sea temperature, Mr. Lightoller?
Last check down 5 degrees to 34 Fahrenheit, sir.
Another communication, Captain. Ice warning, sir, from the Crinian.
Another one?
They've sighted a large berg at 4150 north by 4952 west.
Plot the course with the rest that we've received.
It's directly in our new course, sir.
Not to worry. It's at least 600 miles off.
Still.
Not to worry. We'll keep a sharp eye, eh? And Mr. Murdoch, increase speed to 22 knots.
22, Captain.
Yes, well, we want to keep Mr. Ismay from returning to the bridge again.
Of course. Boiler rooms. Give us 71 revolutions.
If my memory serves me, Mr. Murdoch, you qualified for your master's papers when you were 25 years old. The youngest man in the line's history. And yet, here you are still without a ship of your own. What are you waiting for, Mr. Murdoch?
The master of a ship carries a heavy responsibility, sir.
Every single day, Mr. Murdoch.
I'm not certain I'm up to it.
The ship's master must be certain of everything, even when he's not. Just as I am as certain that this will be my final crossing.
Captain.
Well, yes, after 43 years at sea, I informed the line of my wish to retire. They asked me to stay on to see them through this maiden voyage. My wife was disappointed, of course, but how could I refuse? Take over, Mr. Murdoch.
Thousands on board, each in his class. You are the master of all that must pass. Yours to set course, yours to command. You hold their souls in the palm of your hand. You hold their souls in the palm of your
It's about time to eat. Oh, thank you very much, little lady. How are you?
Third-class passengers are reminded not to take food below to their cabins.
But I paid for it.
Well, what's the reason for that then?
It encourages the rats.
Oh, they got rats on a brand new ship.
They're always the first aboard.
Well, they're welcome to have part of my share. Sure, and me entire family can live a week off what I've been leaving on me plate. And all of it for free.
Free? Are you daft then? And what do you suppose they charged us every bit of 60 shillings for our passage? What do I need with all this fine cloth and electrical light?
Well, Jim Farrell, I'm going to have fine cloth, electrical light, and a whole lot more when I get to America, including my own personal bathtub. I'm going to rise straight to the top, I will.
just like cream. I will be a proper person. People will look up to me. What a girl, that girl McGowan. Katie, Violet, Maud, Marie. I aspire to heights of glory in the new world that can be. In that grandest nation I'll stand tall, reach my very highest hopes of all. Am I meant to have a real profession, I am?
Me too. Me 3?
I want to be a lady's maid in America. In America, the streets are paved with gold.
I want to be a governess in America. In America, it's better, I am told. I want to be a sewing girl in America. In America, oh, sew till I am old.
There's a place called Chicago. I've seen it on a map.
There's a place called Maryland. I've seen it on the map. There's a place in America called Albuquerque. And I'm hoping it's a bit like Donegal.
Oh, I'm hoping that it is. There, I'm hoping that it is. Where my dreaming and my hoping and my scheming and my praying and my wishing to be happy will come true enough and
I want to be an engineer. In America, the streets are paved with gold. I want a shop to call my own.
I will be
In America, it's better, I am
told.
Far beyond the northern sea, a new life can unfold.
And I'm planning that it will.
I'm planning that it will. Where my dreaming and my hoping and my scheming and my praying and my wishing to be happy will come true enough.
I want to be a millionaire in America. Try get rich and spend the fortune I amass.
I want to be a constable in America. In America, you rise above your class.
There's a place for industry and talent can be sold.
And I'm certain that it will. There, I'm certain that it will.
Ik wil een goede slepen apen.
Una bella vita negli Stati Uniti.
Where my dreaming and my hoping and my scheming and my praying and my wishing to be happy will come true enough. I want to rise above myself.
I will be proud. America, the streets are paved with gold. I want to be a lady's maid.
Millionaire in America.
A place for me and you. Better land to start anew. Better land for the bear.
Caroline, shouldn't we be changing for dinner?
I suppose so.
Then you go on, darling. Unless you would like me to do it first?
Charles, don't you think we could start changing together? Considering we're already sleeping together.
Lady Caroline, is that you? I had no idea you were on board.
What a nice surprise. Mr. Etches, I'd like you to meet my new husband, Mr. Charles Clark. Charles, Mr. Etches was chief first cabin steward on the Majestic when my family and I crossed last year.
Mr. Etches? Mr. Clark, my congratulations to you, sir. And how is Lord Neville?
My father's quite well, thank you. That is, last I saw him.
Please give him my regards. I really can't understand how I've missed seeing you before now, Lady Caroline.
It's a very large ship, Mr. Etches. And we are on our honeymoon.
Oh, yes, I quite understand. Again, my heartiest congratulations to you, Lady Caroline. Or should I say Mrs. Clark? I'm sure you'll both be very happy.
You couldn't quite say the words, could you, Lady Caroline?
What words?
Second class?
Charles, you're being completely idiotic.
Why? Because all your father ever saw when he looked at me was the son of a greengrocer from Maida Vale, who went to the wrong schools and who will never be good enough for his precious daughter, even if he won the bloody Nobel Peace Prize?
No, you're being completely idiotic.
Thanks very much.
Charles, you silly thing, making of everything social class. As if that could matter a jot to me. All that I care for is you. How to explain to you all that brings pain to you soon will pass. If only you could comprehend. I want to be yours till the end. You and I now stand on the brink of our new lifetime with our future clear and bright. I give you my hand, I give you my soul in keeping. All I am is yours tonight. Let the journey start. We'll go on together. Where we have come from doesn't matter at all.
I'm in love with you.
There could be no finer blessing for our life that's yet to be. I have all I have dreamed when you're standing next to me.
It's turning bloody cold, isn't it, Mr. Lightoller?
Yes. It feels rather more like February than April.
Oh, my entrance, there you are. I've been looking for you everywhere. I want your opinion on how you think the crossing is going so far.
Not as well as I'd hoped, Mr. Ismay. We've had a few problems.
Really? Such as what?
Well, the kitchen staff are complaining that the sleeping quarters are overheated, and I'm not impressed with the water pressure on the upper decks.
That's gratitude for you. In my father's day, they're lucky to have heat at all. Tell me, what do you think of our current speed?
I think we're going quite fast, Mr. Ismay.
Really? I can't help but tell you I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping to make New York by Tuesday afternoon. At this rate, we'll never make it.
Mr. Ismay, we're doing 22 knots. That's faster than any White Star ships ever managed.
Let me ask you straight out, Andrews. You fellows at Chapman and Wolfe, you built the Titanic, didn't you?
Yes.
And you built the Cunard ships as well.
Yes.
Was Titanic intentionally built to go slower?
I really must protest the implications, sir. When your father ran the line, he demanded safety and comfort before speed. Now, the Cunard may get their passengers there a little faster, yes, but the White Star gives them a far better ride.
Yeah, well, it's a new age, Mr. Andrews, and speed is prized above everything else. Americans would gladly lose their meals over the rail if it meant getting into New York a day sooner.
Mr. Ismay, is there something you wanted, sir?
Yes, E.J. I wonder if you could tell me with any accuracy that we could arrive in New York by Tuesday afternoon.
I can only say it's possible.
Possible? It's imperative, damn it! If we have to hold off until Wednesday morning, that means our return trip to England will be delayed by 24 hours. Titanic must be known as a 6-day ship. Even the bloody Krauts can do it. If second-rate tubs like Deutschland or Kaiser Wilhelm can do it, then so by God should we.
I'm sure we will do everything we can, Mr. Ismay.
Splendid. That's all we can hope for then, I suppose.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Who's there?
Barrett. Barrett.
Oh, the stoker. Oh, I remember. Welcome to the most important place on the whole ship. What can I do for you, Barrett?
I heard you could actually send a message back to England.
You heard right, all right. Sitting right here, I can communicate with important people all over the world.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'd show you how it works, but I'm afraid... hold on. There's a message coming in. Iceberg warning. From the Baltic. That's your old ship.
Yeah.
Well, as you can see, I'm extremely busy, so what is it you want?
Shouldn't the captain know about the iceberg then?
Not to worry. I've sent him a half-dozen messages just like it. If you ask me, they don't know what the bloody hell they're doing up there, excuse my French. It's like we say in the telegraphy business. You can't be a radio operator and remain a Christian.
So how much would it cost for me to send a message back to my girl in England? A sort of romantic message.
Very pretty.
Aye.
But romantic or not, minimum rate's £2, 4 pence.
2 bloody quid? That's twice what they pay me to go to America and back.
Hold on. Maybe we can work out a professional discount.
Yeah? What would that cost?
Nothing. They'll never know the difference.
Ha, very much. You must be a sort of a romantic person yourself.
Oh, not me. Romance and telegraphy don't mix, see? How can you communicate with just one person when you've got the entire world talking to you? I'll need her name and address.
Darlene Watkins, Billsthorpe, Nottinghamshire. What's that you're doing?
Darlene Watkins, Billsthorpe, Nottinghamshire. So, what's the rest of it?
I don't know. It's got to be just the right thing. Darlene's sort of funny, you see, and she told me if I wouldn't take her serious, she knew somebody who would. So I might as well just come out with it. I'll be coming back to you, Darlene. Back to your dark eyes and hair. Marry me when I return, Darlene. And until that day, my love, take care. Be thee well. May the Lord who watches all watch over thee. May God's heaven be your blanket as you softly sleep. Marry me when you're finally in my arms, you'll plainly see This devoted sailor's heart and soul are yours to keep.
Yours to keep. Every day from GMOM, good morning, old man, to GNOM, good night, old man. My telegraph sends its messages to ships at sea, sending out its dit-dit-da-dit-da-dit, dit-dit-da-dit-da-dit, dit-dit-da-dit-da-dit. I was young and shy, detached and sad. Spent my days indoors, a homebound lad. Hardly spoke, few friends, I kept myself to myself, quite alone. Then I found Marconi's telegraph. It could span the planet's width by half, 50 yards, 2,000 miles, the same, touch the spot, sound the tone. And the night was alive with 1,000 voices fighting to be heard, and each and every one of them and my life came alive with 1,000 voices tapping out each word like 1,000 people joined with a single heartbeat, tapping out our dit-dit-da-dit-da, dit-dit-da-dit-da, dit-dit-da-dit-da.
Signed, Fred.
Message received.
Ladies and gentlemen, after our Sunday service, all first-class passengers are invited to the boat deck, where our bandmaster, Mr. Wallace Hartley, and his ensemble will be playing out of doors for your entertainment. And now, let's conclude the service by turning to page 27, God Lift Me Up.
God lift me up in mighty waters. Keep my eyes on things above. Righteousness, divine atonement, peace and everlasting love.
Ladies and gentlemen, Everyone up and out, follow the band and shout, isn't it a lovely day? Watching all the ladies in Parisian fashion on display.
Young Mr. Hartley is playing quite smartly in rhythm that could never lag.
It's a musical treat to hear a band with a beat performing their latest track.
I love the cool of the breeze, feel the rhythm of the song in your knees, promenading along at your ease like a feather in the air. Is that a hint of a chill? When you're dancing out of doors, it's a thrill. Keeps you hearty and healthy still. Take a partner if you dare.
Everyone is bursting with emotion,
dancing as we cross the mighty ocean, moving to the rhythm of the latest breath. Come on and dance with me, please. Feel the rhythm of the song in your knees, promenading along at your ease like a feather in the air. Is that a hint of a chill? When you're dancing out of doors, it's a thrill. Keeps you hearty and healthy still. Take a part if you dare.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Domicos!
Come. Young man, the lady needs a partner. You can't dance by yourself.
Out on the well deck, ship's personnel deck, feel all the ocean spray.
Get yourself upon the upper hotel deck, oh what a swell deck, great for your déjeuner. Turn the corner on the port parallel deck, it's sloppy bill deck, all of the rest passé.
Now the band is betting, the ragtime setting will take you away. Everyone up and out, nobody lag about, let your dark spirits climb. Strolling with the orchestra beside you, playing for time.
We've got a fellow who's better on cello than any other ship can brag.
Take a girl by the hand and lend it into the band with today's latest track. Come dancing
Out on the well, the ship's personnel deck, feel all the ocean spray.
Jump up on the
Upper hotel deck, go on a swell deck, kick all your cares away. Or parallel deck, great thing was hell deck, all the girls sashay. Now the ragtime music will take you away. Dancing well, the ship's personnel deck, feel all the ocean spray. Upper hotel deck, go on a swell deck, yeah.
Everyone is bursting with emotion, dancing as we cross the mighty ocean. Hasn't it been absolutely great to dance all day?
Alice, I've been looking for you everywhere. You're not supposed to be here. What have you been up to?
Afternoon dancing?
Afternoon dancing?
They call it a thé de sang.
Back home, that's what they call a crock of shit.
Language, Edgar!
Come on, little girl. I really don't think we belong here.
Oh, applesauce, Edgar. I have danced with the first class, Edgar. It was oh such a dream come true.
That class isn't for our kind, Alice.
That won't do. Haven't you noticed, Edgar, these days nobody's better than anybody else? Take the Wideners of Philadelphia. I stood right next to them, Edgar. They have this extremely handsome son, Harry, the Harvard man. I'll tell you the God's honest truth, Edgar. I'd let that boy marry our Lucy in a second.
Well, that's half the battle.
Make fun all you want, Edgar, but I want more out of life than Indianapolis, Indiana.
But that's why I arranged this trip, Alice, to show you the world.
I don't want to see the world, Edgar. There's too many other places I'd rather see first. There are hotels on islands, Edgar. Great resorts near a sandy beach.
That's a world that's beyond our our reach.
That's because you've always just been satisfied with one dinky little hardware store instead of branching out. How do you think all those millionaires made their millions, Edgar?
Why don't you just calm down, Alice, and enjoy what we have?
Please don't tell me never. I'll want this forever, ever. There's a new world around us, Edgar.
Won't you ever give up that view?
I want more than we've got now, Edgar. Why don't you?
I don't know. What do you suggest we do about it, Alice?
I don't know. I'm gonna take a walk now, Edgar. I need to be alone for a while.
Three bells, Mr. Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Lightoller. Hold the course west-northwest 292 degrees.
Mr. Murdoch, what's our present speed?
Steady at 22 knots, sir.
Have there been any reports of mechanical difficulty since reaching that speed?
No, none at all.
Very good. Increase speed to 23 knots.
Captain, there's been another ice warning, sir. Masabi reports a large berg at 42 degrees north.
42 degrees. That's in line with all the other reports we received, except this one from the French line La Touraine, 41 degrees. Now that puts it a good deal closer, doesn't it? How do you account for the difference?
Must have been error in transmission, sir.
Oh, the radio. I'll never accept that damn thing.
I'm afraid it's here to stay, sir.
Soon we'll be getting our orders from safe, dry little offices on shore.
It's a brand new world, Captain.
Well, thank God I won't be around to see it. 23 knots, Mr. Murdoch.
23 knots. Aye, aye, sir. Boiler room, give us 81 revolutions.
I'm still waiting, Mr. Strauss.
For what?
For the reason you sent our son Jesse a radio message.
He and his cousin Nathan want to make Macy's the largest retail store in the world. They even want to give away catalogs like Sears and Roebuck. It's totally crazy.
And what did you tell him?
To go ahead. It's a new world out there, Mrs. Strauss. I don't pretend to understand it.
Good evening, sir. Henry Etches, first class steward.
Good evening. Edgar Bean, second class passenger.
Bean? I know that name.
You probably ran into my wife. She likes dancing with millionaires.
Ah, yes, quite so, sir. My condolences.
That's a far-off look I'm seeing in your eye, Kate. Which far-off place is it you're looking at? America or Ireland?
If you must know, I was thinking about a friend of mine, a very dear friend. It seems she left home because she'd made a mistake she couldn't get rid of.
She should have been more careful.
And what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Who knows? Maybe I'll run for Congress again. You know, to tell you the truth, I really liked it there. And the best part of it is, you don't have to know anything.
It seems she wants more out of life than I can give her.
Isn't that always the way, sir? I had a wife once.
What happened?
Nothing. I still have her. In all my years, I've never seen it quite so calm.
Is it my imagination, or are we moving faster than ever before?
If my friend were here instead of me, Jim, what would you tell her?
Well, what would I call her then?
We're all named Kate, you know that.
So I'd say, Kate, do you know who the father is?
What's a sad question? What do you take her for?
And he refused to go with her. Decent work being hard to find, he probably didn't want to lose his job.
Or his wife. So, tell me, Jim, could a decent feller care for a woman who already has a bit of family?
nothing to spy things by. No wave, no swell, no line where sea meets sky. Stillness, darkness, can't see a thing says high. No reflection, not a shadow, not a glint of light meets the eye. We go sailing, sailing, ever westward on the sea. We go sailing, sailing, ever on going.
It's a beautiful night, Mr. Strauss, even though there's no moon. Look at all the stars. Can you find the Big Dipper?
The Big Dipper? I can't even find our own stateroom. Every time I go for a walk, finding my way back is an adventure.
Maybe you should drop breadcrumbs.
Can you feel how cold it's getting, Mrs. Strauss? All in the past couple of hours. Would you like me to get your fur stole?
What? And maybe never see you again? No, thank you. I'd rather freeze.
Are you cold then, Katie?
Not now that you've got your arm around me.
But I don't. You're a funny one, Kate McGowan.
Funny? Thanks very much.
Because you come right out with what you want.
And you find that funny, do you? What kind of girl do you think I am? You think I need to be told what I want? Life's too short for that, me boy.
The weather's quite changed, Mr. Lightoller.
Yes, sir. It's turned very cold. Only 1 point above freezing.
Ocean temperatures down to 31 degrees, Captain.
Inform the carpenter to check the supply of fresh water, and have the engine room check the steam winches.
Aye, aye, sir.
There's not much wind, is there?
No, sir. It appears to be a flat calm.
We go
See how
sailing,
calm it is, smooth as polished glass, of the open sea. Feel the fight in the air. Of the open sea, smooth as polished glass. Good night, gentlemen. I'll be just inside. And keep a sharp watch. Remember, the naked eye, that's something you can depend on.
Good night, sir.
Good night.
Crow's Nest, this is the bridge. Keep an eye peeled for ice.
Charles, think in 2 days, America. What's the first thing you're going to do when we get to America, darling? Besides marry me, of course.
Apply to the sports desk of an important New York newspaper. I'm sure they could use a journalist with my experience.
But you don't know anything about American sports, do you, darling?
Well, it's not so terribly complicated, really. Their football is similar to our rugger, you see. Except for some reason, their chaps require a great deal of padding.
They sound like an intimately sensible sort.
Let us both hope so. That's why we're going there.
Good evening.
Madam, this happens to be the smoke room.
So I see.
Women are never permitted in the smoking room, madam.
Oh, don't look so shocked. There's a new world out there.
There's a new world out where?
Mr. Hartley, that's a new melody. What's it called?
Autumn, ma'am. Autumn, shall we all meet in the autumn? Golden and glowing by autumn. Shall we still be best of friends? Best of friends. All through each language season we end. Love won't retreat in the autumn. We'll be complete in the autumn. All that we have won't be past, won't be past. Let breezes blow and turn cold as we continue growing old this autumn. Love newly found may yet last.
So, Kate McGowan, what immodest thing are you going to say to me next then?
I'm going to say, Jim Farrow, will you marry me?
For the love of God, Kate. I know it's the new world we're going to, but we haven't gotten there yet. Don't you leave nothing for the man to say?
No, he can say yes. We're gonna need each other when we get there, and me baby's gonna need a dad, so we better settle it right now then. Will you say yes?
Well, I might as well. Chances are you wouldn't take no anyway. Well, Kate, aren't you going to throw me down and kiss me?
Ahead we plow into the darkening night. Can see the pow, how then to set with only
Thank you. Hard to starboard, Mr. Lightoller.
Hard to starboard, sir. The helm's hard over.
Engines full astern.
Full astern, sir. The valve's reacting, Mr. Murdoch. 2 degrees to port.
The distance, Mr. Fleet.
About a quarter of a mile, maybe less.
9 degrees. 10, a full point.
Damn it.
Jesus, Mary, Mother, and Joseph, look at the size of that
Looks
thing.
like the rock of bloody Gibraltar.
I think we'll pass him to starboard, sir.
Yes, I think it's all right. I think we might miss it.
We're taking water in boiler rooms 4, 5, and 6, sir. In 6, the water's already up to the knees.
Close all the watertight doors, Mr. Lightoller, and activate the pumps, and make sure that the carpenter is roused and have him sound the ship. Mr. Lightoller, Mr. Murdoch, what's our course? Our course, Mr. Murdoch!
Latitude 41 degrees, 44 minutes north, longitude 50 degrees, 24 minutes west, sir.
Yes, the radio room. Mr. Murdoch, let go of the helm. We're dead in the water.
I'm sorry, sir. PJ, why was stopped? I want an immediate explanation.
We've hit an iceberg, Mrs. Ismay.
Well, that was damn careless of you.
We're assessing the damage now, sir.
Damage? What damage?
Captain, there's a series of small gashes below the waterline stretching 300 feet in length along the starboard side. There's water in the forepeak, in the 1, 2, and 3 holds, in the mail room, in 3 of her boiler rooms, in all. 6 of her 16 compartments have been breached.
But that's all right. You said they were all watertight.
She was designed to stay afloat with any 3 flooded. 4, perhaps, but certainly not 6.
Andrews, what are you saying?
Titanic is sinking, Mr. Ismay.
Nonsense. God himself couldn't sink the ship.
How long has she got, Mr.
An hour and a half. 2 at the most.
Strange and quite disorienting being here, recently awakened from a dream. How the lights burn, every crystal bright as a star. Dressing your pajamas in the grand salon looks to be bizarre in the extreme. Things would improve if the steward opens a bar.
Oh, it's a memory I want to keep.
Now I would like to go back to sleep. Dressing your pajamas in the grand salon, wondering if things are what they seem. Can you be sure you ever know where you are?
Ladies and gentlemen, could I have your attention, please? The captain would appreciate it if all of you were wearing your life preservers.
Mr. Etches, over here.
I'll be right with you, sir.
Mr. Etches, what the devil's going on?
Tell me straight, man. Are we in any danger?
Danger, Mr. Strauss. On this ship, Mr. Astor, please, your life belt. Mr. Guggenheim, please put it on now. Captain's orders. Ladies and gentlemen, wear your life belts. Mrs. Widener, if you would, ma'am. Mr. Thayer, I must insist now. It's a mere formality. There is no cause for concern. We'll be on our way. A minor delay now. A simple precaution. A moment of rest. We'll be on our way. We hardly need stay now. In a moment or two, she'll be right again, traveling west.
Mr. Etches, I demand to know exactly what is happening.
The latest word, sir, seems to be that she's damaged one of the wing propellers, and we could be delayed for an entire day, sir. We were due for something on Tuesday.
I don't like the way this sounds.
Not a bit, not a little bit.
We spent 1,800 pounds.
Not a bit, not a bit, not a little bit.
This is not the sort of a voyage we paid for. I demand to know what the ship is delayed for right now.
How could this ever have come to pass?
Christ, look who's here, it's the second class.
Edgar, look, what did I tell you? Everybody who's anybody.
You're the only person here I don't recognize.
Everything is gorgeous in the Grand Salon, stunningly appointed for the cream. Thousands of bucks get a trip deluxe without par.
Mr. Astor, please, your life belts. Mr. Guggenheim, please put it on now. It's a mere formality, there is no cause for concern. We're on our way, a minor delay now. A simple precaution, a moment of rest. We'll be on our way, we hardly need stay now. Guggenheim, please, upstairs now. Mrs. Widener, if you would, ma'am. It's a mere formality, there is no cause for concern. We'll be on our way, on minor delay now. A simple precaution, down moments of rest. We'll be on our way, we hardly need stay now. Any minute now, any minute now, any minute now. We'll be on our way, we'll be on our way, we'll be on our way, our way, our way.
Jim Farrell, are you down there? It's blocked up here, we can't get through. What the hell are we supposed to do? Jim Farrell, where have you gotten to?
Over here, Kate. Look here, Kate. There's water running on the floor. See, it's coming underneath the door, and I think behind it there's lots more. It's 2 feet deep in the men's dormitory. The boat's sinking.
What are we supposed to do then? Drown with all the other rats? Don't be daft. There's lifeboats. They're up there. I've seen them in a snapshot. Me too, Kate. Me three, Kate. How the hell do we get up there? How the hell do we get through that gate? How long are we supposed to wait? Who the hell is looking out for us?
What in the hell are you people still doing down here? Don't you know the ship's on her way down?
Who are you then?
Frederick Ballard, Stoker, we have to get to the lifeboats.
What do you think we're trying to do, man?
We are goners for sure if we can't get to the lifeboats.
We'll have to find another way, all right?
What other way? I've never seen no other way.
There's another way up through the radio room. I snuck up there yesterday and I
How could
didn't
such a
get
terrible
caught.
thing happen to such a remarkable... You wait and see. We're going to end up having to swim to America.
Gentlemen, this way, please. We're headed for the boat deck.
Not so fast, Alice.
No, I want to make sure we're next to the after.
Stay together no matter what.
I promise, darling.
I'm sure it hasn't escaped your notice, sir, that there are in excess over 2,200 souls upon this ship.
I'm well aware of that, sir.
And room for less than half that in the lifeboats.
I didn't design this ship, Mr. Andrews.
And I didn't instruct the management on the number of ships.
Well, evidently 20 boats was enough to satisfy the line. How many boats would we need to satisfy every man, woman, and child aboard?
54. But the line felt that anything over 20 would take away too much deck space from the first class. I'm afraid well over half of us will be dead in approximately 90 minutes.
Not if a ship arrives.
Do you know of one?
I'm on my way to find out now.
All first and second class passengers are proceeding to the boat deck as ordered. All third class have assembled below on the well deck, awaiting instructions.
Captain, I'm not sure the passengers and crew fully understand their predicament. You have to tell them that they need to...
Tell them what, Mr. Andrews? That nearly 1,200 of them are already dead? I think not. There'd be general panic. They'd kill each other.
Awaiting instructions, Captain!
What? I want you on top, looting the boats.
But the third class pass, they're all waiting below.
That's not your concern. Carry on.
Yes, sir.
Are you taking it upon yourself to decide who lives and who dies? I'll remind you that while you were captain, you were not hired to play God.
Then let it be God who decides.
It appears he's already favoring the first class.
How so?
They're the closest to the lifeboats, aren't they?
Then perhaps he'll send us a ship to even the score.
CQD! Titanic CQD! Situation critical.
Radio man, have you reached any ships?
Can't you see I'm busy? Go bother the captain!
This is the captain!
Sorry, sir.
Sit down, Mr.
Bride, sir, with the Marconi
Sit down,
International
Mr. Bride.
Yes, sir.
Have you reached any ships in the vicinity, Mr. Bride?
506, sir. The closest seems to be Carpathia, a Cunard liner.
Yes, I know Carpathia.
She acknowledged our CQD at 11:58 p.m., saying she has turned and is coming hard.
How far is she?
58 miles, sir.
That's more than 4 hours.
Carpathia can't be the only ship in the vicinity, Mr. Bride.
There was one other, the Californian. Her signal was much stronger than the others. I'd put her within 10 miles, but since the accident, there's been no response.
Why not?
I don't know, sir.
EJ,
You got to do something.
And what do you propose we do, Mr. Ismay?
You need to get another ship here right away.
The closest one is nearly 4 hours away.
4 hours? We'll be at the bottom by then.
California, you said she might be close by.
I'm sure she is, sir, but still, no response.
Well, you must demand a response.
It's these smaller ships, sir. They only carry one radio man. I'm sure he's signed off and gone to bed.
Well, keep trying, for God's sake.
Well, there is a new distress call, SOS. It's hardly ever been used yet.
Yes. Do whatever you need to, Mr. Bride. We must rouse that ship.
SOS. Titanic SOS. Situation critical. Come in, Californian. Where are you, old man? Why the hell won't you answer?
Surely something can be done to help us.
Thousands on board, trusting and warm, roused from their sleep, sent up above, unsinkable ship. What is she now? What is she now?
Possibly she won't go down. Possibly we'll stay afloat. Possibly all this could come to an end on a positive note.
Not unless the ship could fly. Not unless we all sprout wings. Honestly, sir, I have built her from scratch, and I know certain things.
If you know so much, why didn't you know to prevent this? What's to become of us all now that Providence sent this? This is your work, Mr. Andrew. You have done us in. Where's our leak-proof bulkheads? Where's our double skin? It's your job. If someone should take the blame, it is you. You.
Innocent folk held in our care, living their lives, dreaming their dreams, dreaming their dreams.
Possibly a ship will come. Possibly we'll all be saved.
Damn it, sir, listen, we're hemorrhaging fast. It's a hole that's been saved.
Couldn't you design it right? Whoever heard of steel that rips?
Mr. Ismay, I'm just in the business of building. It's God who sinks ships.
There stands the captain who sailed us straight into disaster.
So now it's the captain's turn. Pray, who urged him to go faster? Well then, thank you, Mr. Ismay, for your contribution. Now please pray for some miraculous solution. Your timing is perfect. Now help us, please, if you can.
Who called for speed and to break every record? Who had to keep all the millionaires happy?
How dare you, Smith? I will not stand here indicted. Who ignored warnings of icebergs when sighted? Who, sir, refused to extend up the bulkhead?
You, sir, to give the first class bigger staterooms.
And who undermined the position of captain?
And who took a course too far north for the season?
And who kept insisting we land ever sooner?
And who should have
And who had to
both
have both the largest and
Who
best?
did it?
Who did it?
Who did it?
Who did it?
Who did it?
Possibly the Lord will act.
Possibly he will provide
And indicate how our unthinkable fate can be somehow denied. Somehow denied.
Your work, no one else's.
one captain, and I was in charge. This is my ship, no one else's.
All women and children will commence boarding the lifeboats.
Men will please stand back.
John. You and I are getting in a lifeboat. Father will be staying here a while. It will be like rowing in the Serpentine. Come along now, let us have a smile.
Along with Mother to the lifeboat.
John.
Don't even say it, I'll be fine. I'll collect you both tomorrow morning. You and this beloved child of mine.
Madam, step this way into the lifeboat. Mr. Strauss, by all means, take a place.
No, I will not go before the younger man. Ida, you must go now.
What about you?
Ida, please, I'm telling you to get into the lifeboat.
I refuse.
Refuse? How can you refuse? After 40 years, you cannot refuse.
I am sorry, Isidore, but after 40 years, how can I leave you now?
Because you must be sailing.
For what? To live without you? Absolutely not. Where you go, I go.
Must get in, please step this way.
Hurry now, you must get in the
Time,
lifeboat.
please don't be late. This is the last to leave, it must be lowered now.
Now you
Must get in, please step this way. There's no time, please don't be late. This is the last to leave, it must be lowered now.
There's got to be a place on that lifeboat. Kate, take it for God's sake.
I'm not going without you, dear. I don't want to be a widow before I'm a brother.
You're going to be a lady's maid. Lady's maid in America.
This boat needs 2 men at the oars. You, Mr. Fleet.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
You, Stoker.
Barrett, sir.
Barrett, can you row a boat?
I don't know, sir. I never tried.
I can row, sir. I was a fisherman by trade.
Then get in, man. Hurry.
That I will, sir. Thank you. I'm sorry, mate.
Oh, good luck to you, mate. Get into the boat, Alice.
I'm so sorry for all the horrible things I
Alice, do as I say, damn it.
I love you, Edgar.
Give up your seat, you'll never get a place now.
He's a passenger, isn't he? They're the one that's been paying our wages.
That water looks colder than a polar bear's keister. And it won't be long before we're in it up to ours. Edgar Bean, Hardware.
Was that your wife you were saying goodbye to then?
Almost. We were going to be married when we got to New York.
I was going to be married when I got back to England.
It seems we're both going to wind up bachelors.
Well, could be worse.
Really? How?
At least we're not making any widows.
Good point. What would you gentlemen say to a good stiff drink?
I'd say one won't be nearly enough.
All 20 boats have been launched, Captain.
Thank you, boy. You have a sunny disposition. How old are you?
12, sir.
12. I was a cabin boy when I was 12. What are you called?
Edward, sir.
Edward. That's my name, too.
All of the ladies in first class except one are safely away, Captain.
Thank you, Mr. Edges.
I'm afraid most of the gentlemen we know are still aboard. There's no hope, I suppose. I see. Who could have imagined it, sir? Everyone said she was unsinkable.
Mr. Ismay was proud of boasting that Titanic was her own lifeboat.
That's before he used one of the little ones to save his own skin.
He wanted a legend. Well, now, by God, he's got one.
Captain, I take full responsibility. I was the officer on the bridge at the time. If I were a fit master, I would have rammed the iceberg head on. We'd staved the bow, lost a few people, but the ship would have survived.
I'm sure you did everything that you could at the time, Mr. Murdoch.
You expected more of me, sir. You had every right. Afraid your expectations are misplaced.
The truth is, I've been uncommonly lucky. In my 43 years at sea, I've served on them all the White Star ships. And in all that time, I've never seen or been in any shipwreck, nor seen any other calamity worth speaking of.
Thousands on board, each in his class. You are the master of all that must pass. Yours to set course, yours to command. You hold our souls in the palm of your hand. You hold our souls in the palm of your.
Are you cold, Mama?
Lately, I'm always cold.
Come, I'll blow on your fingers.
Save your breath.
For what?
Mr. Strauss.
Mr. Etches.
Mrs. Strauss. A glass of champagne, perhaps.
Champagne? Why? You think we have something to celebrate?
I brought the Cristal 1898. It's the last bottle left.
My goodness, would be a shame to open it.
Under the circumstances, madam, I think it would be a shame not to.
Won't you join us for a glass, Mr. Etches?
Later, perhaps, sir. I still have my regular people to attend. May I say, it's been an honor over the years serving you both.
To us.
Who else? You know, you're still a pretty good-looking fella.
I would have to be, to keep such a beautiful wife.
Still, the way you put, I love you, still lives in my heart.
After
I now declare this ship lost. From now on, it's every man for himself.
Just a cursory look at the blueprints here show the weaknesses that we have missed. How the water poured in a 300-foot gush and caused a bout of blood into list. And then it filled to the top. Our separate watertight compartments began to overflow because the walls in between the compartments are too low. She's only sinking because these bulkheads stop a deck too low. But here's a thought. Take a line and extend up the walls to the brink. It's just a small redesign, but once it's done, I know she can't sink. Like this. And then like this. And like this. And then like this.
Aren't you gonna make a go of it? Mr. Andrews!
The ship will start to plunge beneath the surface, the water lapping at our feet. Down sinks the bow, applies the stern to the sky, the panicked people in retreat. 1,000 strong, they'll climb up toward the aft deck. They'll cling there desperately like bees to a hive. There they'll hold fast, doomed to the last, lost and abandoned and all still alive. A few of them will hang there from the railings as one by one they drop away. More than 250 feet they will fall, and after that I cannot say. I will not say. The rest in swarms will overrun the boat deck. They'll lose all sense of right and wrong. It will be every man for himself, all right. The weak thrown in with all the strong. First class and third and second, they'll mean nothing. And sheer humanity alone will prevail. One single class, brute, harsh and crass. That's what will come of the world that sets sail. Autumn, shall we all meet in the autumn? Shall we all meet in the autumn?
One moment the ship was there, and the next she was gone.
There were over 1,000 poor souls floundering in that freezing water.
We wanted to go back for them, of course, to pick them up.
But they'd have swamped us. Then none of us would have survived.
The sound they made was deafening, as if there was an entire football stadium out there somewhere.
And then after half an hour, it just stopped.
I'm ashamed to say I was relieved.
I'll hear those voices for the rest of my life.
Why shouldn't I have taken a place in the lifeboat? It would have just gone empty.
There were over 450 empty seats on those lifeboats.
It was so very cold.
The women were so brave, alone in the dark in the middle of the ocean.
If only I'd seen that iceberg before it was too late. If only they hadn't kept increasing the speed.
If only the Californian had heard my call. I stayed with the key till the end. The could have saved every man, woman, and child aboard.
We were only 95 miles from dry land.
They told me the women and children had boarded. That's why I did it.
When dawn came, you could see ice everywhere. It was all bathed in pink, and hundreds of deck chairs floating in the water.
And all of them poor women and children in third class who never even made it to the lifeboats.
All 50 bellboys, none more than 15 years old, went to their deaths without a whimper.
All the musicians who kept playing Autumn right to the end.
With only 711 survivors, 1,517 souls had lost their lives.
Including the man I call my husband.
And my husband.
And my husband.
And my husband.
In a matter of only a few minutes, the largest moving object on Earth had totally disappeared.
Be thee well. May the Lord who watches all watch over thee. May God's heaven be your blanket as you softly sleep.
Softly sleep. In every age, mankind attempts to fabricate great works at once magnificent and impossible. Desert sands and mountains of stone, a pyramid. From flying buttresses alone, a wall of love. And troubled ceilings screaming, one man's ecstasy, one man's ecstasy. Miracles them all, China's endless wall, Stonehenge, the Parthenon, the Duomo, the aqueducts of Rome. We did not attempt to make with many blocks of stone a giant pyramid. No, not a pyramid. No Gothic walls that radiate with light. Our task was to dream upon and then create a floating city. Floating city. A human metropolis, a complete civilization. Sleek and fast, at once a poem and a perfection of physical engineering. At once a poem and a perfection of physical engineering.
On behalf of everyone at the Renaissance Theater, I would like to say how happy we are to be back on stage again and how overjoyed we are to have you back in our audiences. Thank you so much. We have a very special treat, and that is Mr. Tom Goldsmith is with us here today. His grandfather and his great-grandparents were third-class passengers on the Titanic, and he is going to speak with us in 5 minutes here on the stage. We'd love for it if you could stay, but we understand if you can't. We will give you 5 minutes to get out if you have to go. I'm kidding. If you want to meet friends who were in the cast, you can meet them in the outer lobby or in the heat of outdoors, and we will see you back in 5 minutes. Again, thank you so much for coming.
everybody. I'm Ryan Shreve. I hope you enjoyed the performance. But here is something that's really, truly remarkable. A piece of history lives in Mr. Tom Goldsmith, and we're really excited to hear you speak. So go on and share your history with us.
Well, first of all,
He'll get you.
is this thing on? Thank you. Good night. I like to open with that because I get nervous. I'm the grandson of Frank J.W. Goldsmith and the great-grandson of Emily Alice Goldsmith, who both of them survived. My great-grandfather, Frank J. Goldsmith, did not survive. They were third-class passengers traveling from Strood in England to Detroit aboard the Titanic. First of all, I'd like to really, really thank you all for staying around. And wasn't this a great show? Thank you so much. I mean, these guys did an awesome job. The orchestra, you know, the crew that does all the backstage stuff that you never see, the sound guys, the actors, of course. It's just an amazing show. It's the first time I've ever seen it. So thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me be on this stage. My grandfather was 9 years old when they were traveling. Now, what probably helped them on this ship was their berthing space was right by second class. The Titanic was unusual for third-class passengers. Third-class passengers before were called steerage because their berthing spaces were broken up. All the men were in one area and all the women were another. And part of them were in where the steering gear was for the ship, hence the term steerage. On the Titanic, they actually had berthing rooms. They actually had spaces. The males were separated from the females, the singles, but they were in cabins, which was untold of at that time in 1912. Also, they had their own promenade area on the aft of the ship, which was unusual because the third class was like the lowest thing. My grandfather told me what they spent on their tickets would have bought them first class on a lesser ship. He also said the reason why they were on the ship was his father wanted him to remember the voyage. I guess that worked. Not in the way he intended, but it did work. When I watch the show, it brings back a lot of things. Where to start? When they talk about how the Ismays, or not the Ismays, but the Strausses went down together, that brought back part of it. Because when they got to New York, when the Carpathia finally docked in New York, my great-grandmother and my grandfather were taken in by the Salvation Army. Mrs. Macy from Macy's Department Store, which were good friends with the Strausses and were partners, came and picked them up in a limo and took them to Macy's Department Store and bought them clothes and a steamer trunk after she lost her best friends, or some of her very good friends at least. So that brought back memories. So watching the show brings back a lot of things. It's a very great show. I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of things I could say about it, but let's get to the crew. They deserve it. So, and I'll take questions anytime, during. Thank you.
So we can take some questions also if any of the cast members would like to ask a question of Tom. I was telling Tom earlier that when I was about 10 years old, we were studying the Titanic at Lexington. I went to school here, and I had the great pleasure of meeting his grandfather and sitting in their house and him recalling, and I did this class report, which I still have to this day, and I drew a piece of the ship. So it's a story that's certainly remained with me my entire life, and just the fact that we can have you on the stage today. Do any of the cast have any specific questions about your?
I just wondered, was your great-grandfather, was his body recovered?
They were traveling with one of his friends, Thomas Theobald, and one of the neighbors from Detroit. My great-grandmother's family, most of them were living in Detroit at the time, and that's one of the reasons why they were coming over. And his name was Alfred Rush. Alfred Rush turned 16 on April 14th. Now, back in 1912, you were considered a man when you turned 16, and you were allowed to wear long pants. Up until then, you wore knickers or long shorts, much like the kids wear today and those that want to be kids wear today. But on the 14th, he turned 16. So when they were loading the lifeboats, Alfred Rush was grabbed. He was a smaller boy, and the crewmen tried to grab him to get him to go to lifeboats. And at 16 years old, he said, "No, today I am a man. I'll stay with the men." 16 years old, he made a life and death decision. Unfortunately, I do not know if my great-grandfather's body was ever recovered, but Thomas Theobald's body was recovered. Thomas Theobald was a good friend of my great-grandfather's. Before my great-grandmother and my grandfather went to the lifeboat deck, he took his wedding ring off, gave it to my great-grandmother, and said, "If I don't see you in New York, make sure my wife gets this." In June of 1912, just 2 months later, my great-grandmother and my grandfather traveled back to England aboard a ship, because there were no airplanes that did that back then, and took that wedding ring back to his widow. His body was recovered. They pulled everything out of his pockets and buried him at sea. And when they went back to England, Mrs. Theobald gave his dining ticket, his boarding pass, and some other stuff to my grandfather, and those items are displayed down in Pigeon Forge at the museum. Also, Thomas Theobald was supposed to be on the Adriatic, which I believe was mentioned in the show. White Star Line ships were all ended with IC. During 1911, there was a coal strike, so they pulled all the coal off the smaller ships to put on the Titanic to make sure it sailed on time. Coal strike ended in March of 1912, but that wasn't enough time to replenish. So his ticket was struck through from the Adriatic and handwritten Titanic. And that's why Thomas Theobald was aboard the Titanic. So I think that answered your question. It's easier for me without being really prepared. If people ask me questions, I can really feed off of it for my grandfather's story. So thank you. That works.
Any questions from the audience?
Grandpa said that they got on the last lifeboat, and he said it was collapsible D. He described going from their cabin through the second-class dining saloon and down a passageway to a gate. And there was a gate to go to the ladder to the lifeboat deck. Now, it was really late by the time they got there because, I get a little sidetracked here. The lifeboats on the Titanic were of 3 different classes. There was full lifeboats, which were all wooden. There were collapsible lifeboats, which were a wooden keel with a canvas side that locked into place. And then there were life rafts. And they mentioned that there weren't enough on the ship, and there was actually more than required by law. Now, the Titanic was larger than any other ship, so the laws were antiquated. Grandpa and his mother got on collapsible D, which would have been the wooden keel with the canvas sides. When they got to the lifeboat deck, it was so late that the crewmen, they said, were arm in arm, keeping the men back, and they walked through. He said that somebody jumped in front of his mom, and his mom shoved it back, and the crewmen said, "That way, girl, that way. Make sure that they don't get in front of you," or something to that effect. And they got in the lifeboat, and he said he remembered going down the side of the ship. Now, he had talked about how they had to push off the rivets as it goes down, and there's a bit of contention with historians on which side of the ship he was on, but during his story on the lifeboat deck, he said the rockets were over his right shoulder and the sea was off to his left, which put him on the port side, which put him in collapsible D. When they hit the water, they rowed towards the aft and away from the ship, which was standard practice because the ship never stopped. The ship was always moving. When you're on a ship, there's no brakes like there are in a car. So even when the engine stopped, the motion of the ship is still driving it forward. So they go to the aft of the ship to get away from the suction or perceived suction of when the ship goes down. As they're going back, he said his mom grabbed his head and put it against her chest so he wouldn't see his father die. But when the ship broke in two, the aft of the ship raised up and then settled back down. As it broke, it kind of went up about like this and then broke and settled. Well, from their point of view, that looked like the ship was righting itself. And there went about a cry of, "Oh, look, she's going to float." And my grandfather said his mom released him, and he turned and he watched as the ship tilted up and slowly sank into the sea. He said the only way you could see it at that time, because the lights had gone out, they kept the lights on as long as they could, but at that point the lights had gone out and it was a moonless night. The only way you could see the shape of the ship was it blotted out the stars. It was a moonless night, but it was a clear night, and it blotted out the stars as it slowly went down. He said shortly after that he fell asleep. He did say he was never scared of getting into the lifeboat because as a kid on the boat, they were trying, all the pals he was running around, they had been trying to get into those lifeboats the whole time. So he was pretty excited about getting into the lifeboat, so he wasn't scared about it. But he said he fell asleep, and about an hour or two later, I'm thinking it's about when sunrise was, because you're out on the Atlantic, it's a little earlier than it is here in Ohio. And he said he woke up and was looking out what he thought was a porthole or a window on the ship. And it turned out to be the eyelet that the rope holding the canvas side to the framework was. He said after that, shortly after that, the Carpathia picked him up. While on the Carpathia, his mother, who was a seamstress, sewed clothes for those that didn't have clothes out of whatever they could get their hands on, organized sewing parties. They used curtains, blankets, whatever they could get. And then he was taken with the crew. And that was another part of the show that brought back a memory that it just triggered. You saw the crew singing because it's a musical. Well, my grandfather told me a story about what him and his buddies would do is they'd go down what they called Main Street, which was a passageway, and they could hear the crew tapping out songs and singing. And he thought that was cool, and they were his heroes. So while on the Carpathia, Sam Collins, who was a crewman off the Titanic, took him under his wing, and he got to eat dinner with the crew. And he was really excited about that. They actually made him an honorary crewman by drinking a full water glass that was half full of vinegar, half full of water, and a raw egg. And they told him if he could drink that down and keep it down, he could be a full-fledged seaman. He did happen to say that was one of his proudest moments. Now, keep in mind that the stories that I heard was from my grandfather, who was in his 70s. And But when he told them, he wasn't telling them as an old man. He told them as a 9-year-old boy. And I know that sounds strange, but he had a twinkle in his eye and a cheerful voice. My grandmother said he always got sad around April 15th, and she thought for years that it was because of tax time. Because my grandfather never talked about it. He didn't think people were interested. He did do interviews when people would call and stuff like that. It was actually the Mansfield Rotary, which he belonged to, that got him up and speaking in the 1960s.
Any other questions? One back there.
Well, what we have to understand is we have to look back through history, and we have to look at what it is. Today, it's hard to understand this sort of stuff, but in 1912, there was a strict class structure. So yes, there were locked gates, and yes, there were passageways that people were not allowed to pass through. In James Cameron's movie, which I thought was wonderfully done as far as the ship and all the details on it, but Jack and Rose would never have gotten together. It would have been an impossibility because you kept classes separated. One, because of healthcare. Healthcare today is so much farther along than it was in 1912. Third-class passengers didn't have the ability to obtain the healthcare, so they carried more diseases or were apt to have more things. So you separated for that. You separated because of class status. The first class didn't want to mix with me, for instance. They wanted to stay with themselves. Were they intentionally locked down to keep them away from lifeboats? That is something that people like to project, but we also have to look at the design of the Titanic. The Titanic had doors in the side of the ship to open to allow third-class passengers into the boat. In fact, they were actually opened on the starboard side very briefly. The problem was there were no lifeboat drills. The crew was the cream of the crop brought onto that ship without training in the new equipment. The lifeboats were all new. Prior to that, you had to lower them half full because they weren't strong enough. These ones were strong enough to be lowered full. So everything about the Titanic, as far as the lifeboats and how it was supposed to be done, was the big failure was that they weren't trained to do it the way they should have. The stewards that held the keys were not told to unlock the gates because of misinformation about how they were going to get them off the ship. They never really went through it all because they never thought anything would happen. The lifeboat drill was actually supposed to be on April 14th, which was a Sunday. My grandfather and his parents went to church. They went for a promenade walk. It was very, very cold and very, very clear, and they didn't stay out very long. And they canceled the lifeboat drills, from my understanding, because of this, because they didn't want to inconvenience the passengers. Everything was geared towards passengers. So yes, there were gates. Yes, there were locks on those gates for class separation. Was it intentional, in my view, to keep them away from the lifeboats at that time? No, I think it was a matter of confusion more than anything else. Like I said, it's very fortunate for me, for my grandfather and his parents to have been so close to second class that the ship's surgeon is the one that came and knocked on their door and said, hey, you better put your lifeboat or life jackets on and head to the boats. For the ones below, there was a lot of language problems. There was so many different ethnicities on board that didn't speak really good English, or maybe didn't speak English at all. And so they didn't understand instructions, and nobody was giving them proper instruction at the time. I hope that kind of clears some of that up and answers your question.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is your grandfather's book still in print? Can people get it?
Unfortunately, it's not.
Okay.
This is, my grandfather is the only third-class passenger to have written a book on his experience. It was published posthumously. He died in 1982. My grandmother took the manuscript, sent it to Titanic Historical Society, who published it and sold it to their site. They did a second printing, which I think is out as well. So the only way I got copies is I went on eBay and some other places and I had to buy them. I couldn't even get them through myself, so I was fortunate to start hitting the sites early enough that I got a bunch, and I got them for my family. And this is the only hard copy. They only made 500 hard copies of it, and I was fortunate to get one of those. There's a lot of information online about the whole thing. So, yes, ma'am.
Did your grandfather ever talk about traveling or sailing again and what that experience was like?
Well, in 1912, like I said, in June, they traveled back to England. He never really talked about traveling. I know they went on ships. They went on the Queen Mary later in life. In fact, in the foreword, Ed Camuta and I think Walter Lord both start talking about how they saw him off in the 60s for the first time, which I know was wrong, but they said they did. But I know he traveled extensively when he retired. I know he traveled prior to that. As far as shipboard travel, I know he made the trip to England in 1912. I know they went back some other times, but I don't know the dates. And I know they went on trips, him and my grandmother went on trips with the Queen Mary. But he never really talked about them too much. Grandpa emigrated to Detroit, married my grandmother up there, and raised a family of 3 boys. During World War II, he tried to join the Army, and they wouldn't let him because he was too old and had too big of a family or something like that. And the Army Air Corps came to his photography club and asked for volunteers. So during World War II, he traveled around the country teaching aerial photography to the pilots and the crew, and writing aerial publications, aerial photography publications, instruction manuals and such. And they were in Colorado, and they wanted to transfer him to Utah. And my grandmother said, no, we're not going anywhere else. So they ended up in Dayton. Now, my grandmother's family was originally from the area. And so in 1948, they moved from Dayton to Ashland, where I'm from. And he opened Mansfield Photo Supply, which was over here on the square, and he ran that for 25 years. And that's why we're in this area. But he did travel. I know this is a roundabout way, and if I could see my wife, she'd be going like this, stay on point. But yeah, they did a lot of traveling, but he never really talked about his experience on a boat or anything like that, other than the Titanic. And like, I got this story by following him around, and he would tell me pieces and parts and stuff. And my father says I know more about it than he does, so. My great-grandfather's wedding ring? I do not think so. I think he wore that when he went down. I don't know whatever happened to Thomas Theobald's wedding ring, though. And I don't know what happened to my great-grandmother's wedding ring. Yes, ma'am.
again, no one thought that they'd actually be able to see. They would, if they got close enough, they'd be able to see it. This was before they had radar and everything else. The research I did on the character talked a lot about there was just so much turmoil between Ismay and the captain, and him forcing him to do what he was just not. He was a very safe captain. Any ship he ever piloted, he went by the book. He never exceeded speed. So there's a lot of what he just was out of his element. It's all your fault.
If I could add a little bit to that, there is a lot of confusion on this issue. And this is why it took so long to find the Titanic. The Titanic was not sailing the northern course. It was sailing southern. It was actually farther south than the normal shipping course. And that's why it took so long for Robert Ballard to find the ship, because it wasn't where they thought it would be. And this is all research that I've done because I do these presentations. But there was a lot of confusion because, for instance, everybody calls Bruce Ismay the owner on the ship. J. Bruce Ismay did not own the White Star Line. The White Star Line was bought out by J.P. Morgan's International Mercantile Marine Corporation in 1902, the same year my grandfather was born. J. Bruce Ismay was the managing director of the White Star Line. But everybody called him the owner and vilified him for it.
We also found in our research that Ismay had a fight with William Randolph Hearst, who started the smear campaign against him, because it was Ismay who they said helped load the lifeboats, and Etch's character was in the same lifeboat as Ismay was, and he was never called to task for anything. And Ismay also helped raise funds for it, where the White Star Line gave them absolutely nothing. They got nothing from the White Star Line.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you can only believe about 10% of the press.
And a lot of the documents even contradict each other, until Ballard found the wreck. That was the first time they confirmed it actually had split in two, because you watch the old movies and it doesn't. The old, like Barbara Stanwyck movie.
And there's a reason for that. The reason why they wouldn't put that in the Senate inquiries and the British inquiry all had witnesses that said it broke in two. But the White Star Line fought it so hard because they did not want to be known as a shipping company that had a ship to break in two. I mean, that's why it was for years. There was a engineer, a shipbuilder, a very prominent guy that was interviewed by the Senate inquiry, and they asked him what it would take to sink the ship, and he said a bunch of little pinpricks. And they laughed him out of the Senate hearing, about ruined his career. So what did we find when they did the sonar? A bunch of little pinpricks. That's all it took. There's just so much information out there, and so many people have so many different opinions on it. Ismay was vilified. Captain Smith was vilified. Murdoch, he didn't shoot himself. There's no evidence of that. There is evidence, there was witnesses that they heard a gunshot, but there's no evidence that he shot himself.
There's several accounts of how the captain actually died. The movie shows him at the helm, and several things that I read. One was he was saving children, swimming to the lifeboat and swimming back and forth. The other was he actually was on the bridge. And then the other accounts were saying he did help with the lifeboats. Others said he didn't. So
it's just everybody sees things. It's like looking at a train wreck or a car wreck or whatever. Everybody sees things in one little segment at a time, and they're right about that part of it. But they think they see it all. And I've done it. I've looked at something and say, oh my gosh, I've seen it, but I didn't see this. And that's what we're dealing with the Titanic, because during the confusion, you had all these survivors that saw different things. You had all these people that thought they saw something that didn't. And then you had people that actually claimed to be on the Titanic and go around telling stories, and people believed them even into the 1960s. My grandfather kept a scrapbook, and there was one in there about somebody he introduced the Titanic Historical Society that they found out years later was not on the Titanic. Because, yeah.
Who claimed to be in the 9/11 attacks. Anything else? Any more questions? Yes.
There's a lot of things that stuck in Grandpa's mind. If you go back to, well, if you want to talk strictly of the boat sequence, when they separated, when the family separated, my great-grandfather kissed his wife, said goodbye, put his hand on my grandfather's shoulder and said, "So long, Frankie, I'll see you later." My grandfather said, "Goodbye, Dad." I said goodbye to my grandfather one time, and he said, "We don't say goodbye because goodbye is forever." He would say, "Pip, pip, gotta be poppin', cheerio," stuff like that. He talked about a gap that they had to step over to get into the lifeboat. He talked about looking into portholes and seeing the kids, the young stewards, I think, where we got right there, playing games, smoking, and drinking as the ship sank. So he remembered quite a bit. I don't know how much you remember when you were 9 years old or any traumatic event that you may have had prior to 9 years old. I remember quite a bit. I think his memory was really sharp on those issues. He had started having strokes in the mid-70s and lost his short-term memory. And people would tell me, "Well, how much would your grandfather remember at 9? Well, I remember changing my brother's diapers, and he was only 3 years younger than me. I remember we had a marble molly fish that would jump out of the fish tank. I remember all these details. I could still see the color yellow that was in the dining room. So if a traumatic event like the Titanic sinking and losing your father, I think would stick in your mind pretty clearly at 9 years old. He talked about the rockets going off, the last rocket going off over his right shoulder. He talked about the crewmen being arm in arm and the guy jumping in front of his mom and his mom shoving him back. But things were moving at a rapid pace. He didn't talk about minute details as far as the railings and the boards or anything like that. It was moving pretty fast for him, but he did remember quite a bit. But he did say that if they ever found the Titanic and they started bringing stuff up, he wanted his cap pistol back. The story of the cap pistol was that before they were leaving, when they were getting ready to go, they were packing up, and he traded his best top to the neighbor boy for a cap pistol, took it back. His mom asked him, "What do you have?" He goes, "A cap pistol." And she goes, "I don't want you to have that. Take that back." So he walked out dejected, but in front of the house there was a crate with her sewing machine. And my brother says that he hid it in the rug. But I like to think of a 9-year-old boy walking by, all dejected, looking at that crate and just dropping it in there. But yeah, he had a lot of memories. There's a lot of different things that he liked to talk about. But as far as minute details, there wasn't a lot. I mean, there's details, but not anything that he remarked on specially.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tom. This has been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. I mean, this was your show, and here I am talking the time.